Chapter 12. Unbound Flames. Dawn broke over the Spirit Guild mountains with ominous beauty. Golden light spilling across mist-shrouded peaks as the hastily assembled expedition prepared for departure. Lyra stood at the courtyard's edge, watching the methodical preparations with a strange mixture of determination and dread coiling in her chest. The attack on their chambers had changed everything. No longer could they afford a careful, measured approach to the growing threat. What had begun as personal danger, Alek's attempt to control her through the necklace, had expanded into something that threatened not just her freedom, but the safety of an entire city.
Final preparations are complete,
Elder Thorn announced, approaching with the measured stride that somehow covered ground more efficiently than it appeared. His weathered features had hardened into the mask of a warrior, rather than the scholarly mentor she had first encountered.
12 spirit mages will accompany you, including myself and Archseer Nightshade.
The formal use of Cassius's title rather than his name struck Lyra as oddly appropriate given the gravity of their mission, yet simultaneously created distance she found unsettling. Since the attack, something had shifted between them. Not withdrawal exactly, but a careful realignment of priorities as personal connection yielded to the immediate threat.
"Thank you,"
she replied, maintaining the composure expected of a High Councilor's daughter, despite her supposedly deceased status.
"Pyreholm's defenders will be grateful for any assistance against these entities."
Elder Thorn's silver-flecked eyes studied her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see past surface thoughts to the uncertainty beneath.
The entities that attacked you carried a twisted version of your former binding,
he observed.
The fire opal embedded within a collar, designed for something closer to ownership than mere influence.
Heat rose to Lyra's cheeks at the blunt assessment, fingers rising unconsciously to touch the moon opal at her throat. The protection that had prevented her recapture. A gift freely given rather than forcibly imposed.
"Alek's intentions grow increasingly clear,"
she acknowledged, voice steady despite the chill that ran through her at the memory of that grotesque collar dangling from the incubus's clawed hand.
And increasingly dangerous,
the elder added, his gaze shifting toward the eastern horizon where Pyreholm lay beyond visible distance.
What began as personal obsession has evolved into something that threatens the balance between realms.
Across the courtyard, Cassius directed the final loading of supplies onto ethereal mounts that seemed to exist partially in ordinary reality and partially beyond it. Creatures with the general form of horses, yet possessing an otherworldly quality that defied simple description. His movements carried efficient purpose, scholarly precision transformed into a warrior's focus as he prepared for the coming confrontation. Lyra found herself watching him more closely than the practical situation warranted, a yearning beyond tactical considerations making itself known despite her efforts to maintain professional detachment. Since the attack, he had been both omnipresent and strangely distant, supervising defensive preparations, coordinating with guild leadership, ensuring her safety through practical measures rather than personal connection.
He carries a significant burden,
Elder Thorn observed, following her gaze with those perceptive eyes that missed little.
balancing his duty as Archseer with his personal concerns.
The deliberate pause carried volumes of unspoken meaning, yet Lyra found herself unwilling to engage directly with its implications.
"We all have responsibilities that transcend individual preference,"
she replied, the diplomatic phrasing a shield against vulnerability she couldn't afford with their mission's success hanging in the balance. Something like disappointment flickered across Elder Thorn's weathered features before his expression returned to neutral assessment.
Indeed,
He acknowledged, allowing the conversation to shift away from personal matters.
the journey to Pyreholm will take approximately 4 hours using spirit mounts. Your friend Magister Cinderkin has been briefed on what to expect during transit between realms.
At the mention of Zara, Lyra glanced toward the pavilion entrance where her friend stood in animated conversation with a spirit mage whose silver-streaked hair marked her as someone of significant rank, despite her relatively youthful appearance. Zara's diplomatic training was evidently serving her well, bridging cultural differences between guild traditions with practiced ease that belied the extraordinary circumstances.
She adapts quickly.
Lyra observed, gratitude warming her voice. Zara's steady presence had provided essential anchor amid the chaotic developments since her staged death, a connection to her former life that somehow made the strange new reality more navigable.
A valuable trait in uncertain times.
Elder Thorn agreed. His attention shifted as Cassius approached, the preparations apparently complete.
Archseer, your assessment?
We're ready.
Cassius confirmed, his violet eyes meeting Lyra's briefly before returning to professional focus.
The mounts have been enchanted for maximum speed while maintaining stability for those unaccustomed to spirit realm transit.
That momentary eye contact sent a curious warmth through Lyra despite the brevity of the connection. A reminder of what existed beneath their carefully maintained professional exteriors. Not severed, but temporarily suspended. The connection between them remained intact, despite circumstances that demanded tactical priority over personal exploration.
The defensive wards?
Elder Thorn inquired, his tone suggesting this represented a particular concern given their destination.
Triple-layered protection.
Cassius replied, scholarly precision providing reassurance through methodical detail.
Primary shields against direct demonic influence. Secondary barriers to prevent mental manipulation. Tertiary defenses specifically calibrated for the fire opal's particular resonance.
The technical explanation carried personal undertone Lyra couldn't fail to recognize. Protection designed specifically to prevent her recapture. Defenses crafted with her particular safety as primary consideration despite the broader mission parameters. The realization warmed something within her, even as practical concerns dominated their outward interaction.
Excellent.
Elder Thorn approved, turning toward the assembled spirit mages now mounting their ethereal steeds.
Positions then, we depart with the rising sun.
As the elder moved away to oversee final arrangements, Cassius remained behind, creating momentary privacy amid the bustling preparations. His violet eyes searched her face with intensity that transcended professional assessment, concern evident beneath scholarly composure.
The journey will be disorienting.
He warned, voice dropping to ensure their conversation remained private despite surrounding activity.
Spirit mounts travel pathways that exist between conventional space rather than through it. The experience can be unsettling for those unaccustomed to such transit.
I'll manage.
Lyra assured him, appreciating the concern while unwilling to appear vulnerable when so much depended on their successful arrival in Pyreholm.
Fire mages train for disorientation through flame-walking exercises. The principles should be similar enough.
A ghost of a smile touched Cassius's lips at her confident assessment.
Similar in some respects, vastly different in others.
He acknowledged.
Stay close to me during transit. The moon opal will help maintain your orientation, but proximity strengthens its effect.
The simple request carried layers of meaning beyond practical consideration. An expressed desire for her nearness that transcended tactical advantage, yet framed in terms that maintained professional distance appropriate to their current circumstances. The complexity of their situation manifested in this careful navigation between personal connection and mission focus.
Of course.
Lyra agreed. Her own response similarly balanced between acknowledgement of practical necessity and acceptance of more personal implications. Her fingers rose to touch the moon opal, its cool surface warming slightly beneath her touch.
It served me well thus far.
Something shifted in Cassius's expression, a softening around his eyes that suggested emotions held carefully in check.
I'm glad.
He said simply, the words carrying more meaning than their syllables might suggest. Their moment of connection ended as Zara approached, having concluded her conversation with the silver-streaked spirit mage.
Ready for our unconventional journey home?
She asked, diplomatic training allowing her to acknowledge the extraordinary nature of their transportation while maintaining practical focus on the mission ahead.
As ready as possible given the circumstances.
Lyra replied, grateful for her friend's steadying presence as they prepared to face whatever awaited them in Pyreholm. The city she had left through elaborately staged death would soon receive her in very different circumstances. Not as the High Councilor's obedient daughter, but as warning bearer against threats few fire mages would be prepared to confront. Cassius guided them toward the waiting mounts, his hand occasionally touching Lyra's elbow to direct her through the controlled chaos of final departure preparations. Each brief contact sent awareness cascading through her despite the simplicity of the gesture. A tangible reminder of the connection they had established, temporarily set aside but not forgotten amid the pressing danger. The spirit mount assigned to Lyra appeared simultaneously substantial and ethereal. Its form solid when viewed directly, yet seeming to fade at the edges when glimpsed peripherally. Unlike conventional horses, its mane flowed like liquid silver, occasionally separating into individual strands that moved independently before reforming into united mass. Its eyes contained awareness beyond animal intelligence, regarding her with assessment that suggested partnership rather than servitude.
Her name translates poorly to common speech.
Cassius explained as he helped Lyra mount the remarkable creature.
Something like dawn light crossing misty valleys would be the closest approximation.
A bit unwieldy for battlefield commands.
Lyra observed, settling into the saddle that felt more like extension of the mount itself than separate equipment. Cassius's mouth curved in that small smile she had come to anticipate.
Dawn will suffice,
he assured her.
Spirit mounts respond more to intention than verbal direction in any case.
As they assembled in formation for departure, Lyra found herself positioned between Cassius and Zara, the arrangement providing both tactical advantage and emotional reassurance as they prepared to face whatever awaited in Pyreholm. Elder Thorn took point position at the front, his ethereal mount somehow more substantial than the others. A commander's steed for a journey between worlds.
Remember,
Cassius cautioned as the formation finalized.
Maintain focus on your destination rather than the path between. The transition moves through territories not designed for physical perception. What you see during transit exists beyond ordinary reality.
Before Lyra could ask for clarification, Elder Thorn raised his hand in silent command. As one, the spirit mounts stepped forward, not into physical space, but into something adjacent to conventional reality. The world around them seemed to fold inward, colors inverting and recombining in impossible configurations as ordinary perception gave way to something for which Lyra had no adequate reference points. They moved through landscapes that defied description, territories where physical laws represented mere suggestions rather than requirements. Realms where thought and matter exchanged properties with fluid impermanence. Stars burned beneath them while solid ground arched overhead. Gravity reorienting with each step the spirit mounts took along pathways visible only to their otherworldly perception. Disorientation threatened to overwhelm Lyra despite her preparatory breathing exercises. Only the moon opal's cool presence against her throat provided anchor amid the perceptual chaos. That and Cassius's steady form riding beside her, his outlines somehow more defined than their surrounding environment, despite the reality-bending transit. When he reached across the impossible space between their mounts to take her hand, she accepted the connection without hesitation. His touch provided additional grounding amid the swirling insanity of between-realm travel. His fingers interlacing with hers in a gesture that transcended simple reassurance to become essential anchor amid perceptual storm.
Focus on me,
He suggested, voice somehow carrying clearly despite the rushing non-sound that filled what might have been ears in conventional space.
The transit nears completion.
Lyra concentrated on his violet eyes, finding stability in their familiar depths as reality gradually reassembled itself around them. Colors settled back into recognizable spectrum. Physical laws reluctantly reasserted their dominance, and the world solidified into something her senses could properly interpret. They emerged on a hilltop overlooking Pyreholm from the eastern approach, the city's familiar silhouette bathed in late morning light. Yet something was terribly wrong with the familiar vista. Smoke rose from multiple districts, the distinctive amber glow of guild fire magic flaring in defensive patterns around the central administrative quarter. Even from this distance, the sounds of battle carried clearly, shouts of command interspersed with the distinctive roar of magical bombardment.
We're too late.
Zara whispered, horror evident in her voice as she took in the scene before them.
They're already under attack.
Cassius released Lyra's hand as the spirit mounts shifted into more conventional formation, their ethereal qualities becoming less pronounced now that they had returned to physical reality.
Not too late.
He corrected, determination hardening his scholarly features into a warrior's focus.
But certainly with minimal margin for error.
Elder Thorn raised his hand for attention, the assembled spirit mages gathering close for final instructions before entering the contested territory.
Remember your training.
He cautioned, gaze moving between the 12 spirit practitioners who had volunteered for this dangerous mission.
These entities resist conventional banishment. Focus on containment rather than destruction until proper rituals can be performed.
His attention shifted to Lyra and Zara, acknowledgement of their different magical traditions requiring adjusted instructions.
Your flame manipulations provide essential distraction while spirit bindings are established.
He explained, tactical assessment replacing scholarly demeanor entirely.
Precision rather than raw power will prove most effective against these entities.
And those under their influence?
Lyra asked, the terrible question unavoidable as she contemplated what awaited them in the city below. If demons had already breached Pyreholm's defenses, how many citizens, how many guild members had fallen under their corrupting control?
Unconsciousness breaks most forms of demonic influence.
Cassius answered, the gentle delivery failing to soften the brutal practicality of his assessment.
Non-lethal incapacitation where possible, where not.
He left the alternative unspoken, yet its implication hung heavily between them. Some situations might not allow for merciful solutions. A reality Lyra had never faced in her previously sheltered existence as the High Councilor's carefully protected daughter.
We proceed in formation.
Elder Thorn continued, breaking the momentary silence that had fallen across their group.
Northern Gate provides most direct access to administrative quarter, where defensive concentration appears strongest. Spirit shields at maximum configuration throughout approach.
As they descended toward the embattled city, Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs with increasing intensity. Not merely fear, though that existed in abundance, but determined purpose that transcended personal safety. This was her home. These were her people. Regardless of her staged death and subsequent absence, she belonged to Pyreholm in ways that transcended political calculation or familial obligation. The city grew larger before them as they approached, details of the ongoing conflict becoming terrifyingly clear. The northern districts had suffered worst. Entire blocks reduced to smoldering ruins. Buildings collapsed into piles of volcanic stone and burning timber. Citizens fled through streets choked with debris and occasional bodies, expressions vacant with shock or twisted in terror as unseen threats pursued them through the chaos. At the massive northern gate, a desperate defense had been established. Fire mages in guild uniforms maintained a perimeter of flame walls, their faces strained with exhaustion, suggesting hours of continuous magical exertion. Behind this defensive line, senior mages coordinated evacuation efforts, guiding terrified civilians toward the relative safety of the administrative quarter, where the most powerful protective wards had been established. The spirit mounts accelerated as they approached, not through conventional speed, but by subtly altering their relationship with ordinary space and time. One moment, they remained considerable distance from the embattled gate. The next, they materialized directly behind the defensive line in formation, so perfect it suggested hours of rehearsal rather than improvised arrival. Their appearance created momentary panic among the defenders, until Elder Thorn raised his hands in the ancient recognition sign of allied guilds, a gesture not used in living memory, yet immediately understood by the senior fire mages coordinating the defense.
Spirit Guild offers assistance,
he announced, voice carrying authority that transcended the chaos surrounding them.
Where stands your command?
A fire mage stepped forward, an elderly woman whose familiar features caused Lyra's heart to seize momentarily in her chest. Aunt Marina, her father's sister, had assumed tactical leadership of the northern defense. Her usual impeccable appearance had been replaced by soot-stained practical attire. Her flame-red hair, so similar to Lyra's own, streaked with ash and pulled back in warrior's knots suggesting hours of active combat.
Lyra Embersong coordinates northern defense,
she replied, formal third-person response indicating official capacity rather than personal identity. Her exhausted gaze moved across the spirit mages with desperate relief before settling on Lyra, with shock that momentarily shattered her professional composure.
By the eternal flame,
She whispered, recognition dawning despite the circumstances that should have rendered such identification impossible.
Lyra?
The moon opal at Lyra's throat pulsed once, cool energy suggesting protection against potential exposure. Yet Lyra found herself unwilling to deny her identity to someone who had been present throughout her childhood. A woman who had taught her the first flame manipulation techniques that eventually led to her masterful precision control.
Hello, Aunt Marina.
She acknowledged quietly, dismounting from Dawn with fluid grace that belied her internal turmoil at this unexpected reunion.
I know you have questions, but they must wait. What's happening here?
To her aunt's credit, shock yielded immediately to tactical necessity. Whatever emotions roiled beneath her professional exterior, Marina refocused on the immediate crisis with disciplined efficiency that reminded Lyra forcefully of her father.
Demonic incursion began approximately 6 hours ago.
She reported, turning to include Elder Thorn and Cassius in her briefing.
Initial breach at Eastern Market District, followed by coordinated secondary manifestations at all major city gates. Conventional fire magic proves minimally effective against the entities. They absorb or redirect flame-based attacks with disturbing efficiency.
And the leadership?
Elder Thorn inquired, dismounting with the fluid grace that belied his apparent age. Marina's expression tightened with barely contained emotion.
High Councilor Embersong coordinates central defense from Guild headquarters.
She replied, a slight waver in her voice, the only indication of personal connection to the man she referenced.
Inferno Circle representatives were present when the attack began. Some appear to be compromised.
The careful phrasing suggested a reality too disturbing to articulate directly. Guild members who had fallen under demonic influence, now fighting alongside the invaders rather than defending against them. The possibility sent cold dread spiraling through Lyra's chest as she contemplated which of her father's colleagues might have been turned against him.
And Lord Brightforge?
Cassius asked, the question carrying dangerous significance given what they had learned about Alek's connection to the incubus and Kinador. Marina's expression darkened further, confirming their worst fears before she spoke.
Central to the attack?
She acknowledged grimly.
Though changed beyond recognition by something, wearing his form like ill-fitting garment.
The description sent another chill through Lyra as she recalled their banishment of Enkinador. How the entity had promised to inform Alek of her survival. Not mere information exchange, but apparent merging. The incubus and ambitious fire mage becoming something more dangerous than either alone.
We need to reach the guild headquarters immediately.
Lyra stated, decision crystallizing beyond doubt or hesitation.
My father needs to understand what these entities truly are if he's to mount an effective defense.
Agreed.
Elder Thorn said, already signaling the spirit mages to reform for urban movement.
Magister Embersong, your knowledge of city layout provides essential advantage in reaching central administrative quarter most efficiently.
Lyra nodded, momentary surprise at being addressed by her formal title despite supposed death yielding to practical necessity.
The Ember Passage,
she suggested, indicating a narrow street leading from the northern gate toward the city's heart.
Service tunnel beneath the third intersection provides direct access to administrative quarter, without exposing us to open convergence squares, where ambush would prove most effective.
Cassius moved to stand beside her. violet eyes studying her with quiet intensity that transcended professional assessment.
You're certain about this?
He asked softly, the question carrying layers beyond tactical consideration.
Revealing yourself to your father after such elaborate measures to escape his political arrangements?
The concern beneath his question warmed something within Lyra despite the desperate circumstances surrounding them. Not questioning her courage, but acknowledging the emotional cost her decision would exact. Recognition of personal sacrifice beneath necessary action.
I'm certain.
She confirmed, gratitude for his understanding evident despite her measured tone.
Whatever awaits, pretending to be dead while my city burns is not an option I can live with.
Something shifted in his expression. Respect mingled with another emotion she couldn't quite identify in the chaos of their current situation. He nodded once, accepting her decision without further question, his hand briefly touching hers in gesture so subtle, others likely missed its significance amid the surrounding activity. As they organized for movement through Pyreholm's embattled streets, Lyra found herself scanning the northern defensive line with growing concern. The fire mages maintaining the flame barriers showed signs of magical exhaustion, hands trembling with effort, faces drawn with strain that suggested reserves approaching depletion. How much longer could they hold against entities that seemed minimally affected by their primary magical discipline?
Conservation protocols would dictate withdrawal to secondary defensive position.
Marina explained, noting Lyra's assessment of the struggling mages.
But evacuation remains incomplete. Civilians still emerge from northern residential district in concerning numbers.
The spirit mages can reinforce your position temporarily.
Elder Thorn offered, gesturing toward 4 of their company who stepped forward without hesitation.
Their binding techniques prove more effective against these entities, though hardly perfect solution without proper banishment rituals.
Relief flashed across Marina's features at this unexpected assistance.
Appreciated beyond formal expression,
She acknowledged, the simple gratitude-piercing guild formality to reveal genuine emotion beneath her professional exterior.
the northern gate will hold long enough to complete evacuation.
With arrangements finalized, Lyra led the remaining spirit mages toward the Ember Passage, Cassius and Zara flanking her as they moved through streets that had once represented safety and now harbored unknown threats behind each shattered storefront and collapsed building. The familiar cityscape had been transformed into battlefield that simultaneously broke her heart and strengthened her resolve. This was her home, her people, regardless of the deception that had temporarily separated her from both. As they navigated the increasingly devastated urban landscape, evidence of the demonic nature of their opponents became horrifyingly clear. Unlike conventional warfare that focused on military objectives, this attack targeted civilians with deliberate cruelty that transcended tactical advantage. Bodies lay in positions suggesting not just death, but violation. Expressions frozen in ecstasy despite the terrible wounds that had claimed their lives. Postures indicating submission to pleasures that had ultimately consumed them.
Incubi and succubi feed on life essence through pleasure.
Cassius explained quietly as they passed a particularly disturbing scene. A young couple entwined in what appeared passionate embrace, until closer inspection revealed the hollow emptiness where eyes had once held life.
They offer what victims most desire, then consume them through the connection established.
Lyra's fingers unconsciously rose to touch the moon opal at her throat. Gratitude for its protection against such terrible fate. mingling with renewed determination to prevent others from suffering similar endings. Her chest tightened with mixture of grief and rage as they passed another victim. An elderly man whose expression suggested he had seen beloved long dead in his final moments, rather than the demon that had drained his life through manufactured reunion.
How could Alek allow this?
She whispered, the question emerging before she could contain it. Whatever his ambition, whatever his obsession with controlling her through the fire opal necklace, how could the man she had known, however superficially, permit such wholesale slaughter of innocence?
He may no longer control his own actions.
Cassius replied, compassion evident despite his focus on their surroundings as they approached the service tunnel entrance.
Ifrit bargains rarely end well for the human participant. Combined with incubus influence,
he left the implication hanging, unwilling to offer false comfort through speculative assessment. The service tunnel entrance lay partially concealed behind a collapsed market stall, its heavy iron door blackened by fire yet still intact. Lyra approached with caution, years of navigating Pyreholm's hidden passages providing familiarity that transcended the chaos currently engulfing her city.
Blood ward,
She observed, noting the distinctive patterns carved into the door's surface. Emergency measures designed to restrict access during times of crisis.
Embersong lineage required for activation during lockdown protocols.
Without hesitation, she pressed her palm against the central sigil, wincing slightly as hidden needle extracted small blood sample from her palm. The ward flared briefly with amber light as it verified her magical signature. Then the heavy door swung inward to reveal the narrow passage beyond.
Quickly,
She urged, ushering their company into the tunnel before securing the door behind them.
this passage connects directly to administrative quarter, bypassing 3 districts currently under active assault according to what we observed during approach.
The tunnel stretched before them, emergency lighting casting amber shadows across stone walls reinforced with architectural workings designed to withstand even the most catastrophic surface destruction. Unlike the decorative pathways that connected Pyreholm's public spaces, these emergency routes prioritized function over form, a stark reminder of the city's historical awareness of potential threats despite generations of relative peace. As they moved swiftly through the underground passage, the sounds of battle above gradually diminished, replaced by the eerie silence of contained space isolated from the chaos above. Their footsteps echoed against stone floors worn smooth by centuries of emergency drills that had never anticipated actual use.
The main hub approaches.
Lyra informed them, recognizing distinctive markings on the tunnel walls that indicated proximity to central distribution nexus.
From there, multiple routes lead to different sections of administrative quarter. Guild headquarters accessed through northern spoke.
Elder Thorn nodded approval of her detailed knowledge. Tactical assessment overriding any questions about how the High Councilor's supposedly sheltered daughter had acquired such intimate familiarity with emergency evacuation passages.
Formation adjusts for confined space.
He instructed the spirit mages, who immediately rearranged themselves into configuration better suited for the tunnel's restricted dimensions. They reached the central hub without incident, a circular chamber with 8 identical passages radiating outward like wheel spokes from a central platform. Lyra moved confidently toward the northern route, the others following her lead without question, despite the disorienting similarity of the available options. As they approached the passage entrance, she froze. Instincts honed through years of magical training suddenly screaming warning despite no visible threat.
Wait.
She cautioned, hand raised to halt their advance as she studied the seemingly empty passageway before them.
Something's wrong.
Cassius moved to stand beside her, violet eyes clouding slightly as he engaged spirit sight to perceive what might exist beyond ordinary vision.
Presence.
He confirmed, voice dropping to ensure only those nearest could hear his assessment.
Not physical manifestation, but spectral observation. We're being watched.
The revelation sent cold dread sliding down Lyra's spine as she considered implications beyond immediate tactical disadvantage. If something monitored the emergency passages, their approach had already been compromised. Surprise lost before they even reached administrative quarter, where her father coordinated central defense. Before she could suggest alternative route, a sound echoed from the northern passage, soft footsteps approaching from the direction they had intended to travel. The spirit mages formed protective formation around Lyra, Zara, and Elder Thorn without requiring explicit command, hands already weaving preliminary defensive patterns in preparation for whatever emerged from the shadowed tunnel. The figure that appeared sent shock rippling through Lyra despite her mental preparation for potential threats. Not demon or compromised guild member, but familiar features she had known throughout her childhood. Her father's personal assistant, Kaelin, whose meticulous organizational skills had maintained High Councilor Embersong's administrative efficiency for as long as she could remember. Yet something about him seemed subtly wrong. His movements too precise, his expression too composed, given the chaos engulfing the city above. When he smiled in apparent recognition, Lyra's unease intensified rather than diminished.
Magister Embersong?
He greeted her, using her formal title with perfect intonation, despite her supposed death making such address impossible.
How convenient you should return precisely when needed most.
Something in his tone sent warning signals cascading through Lyra's mind. Kaelin's normally warm eyes held a flat, glassy quality that reminded her of the clerk they'd rescued from the incubus's influence. His movements, typically fluid and efficient, now possessed a mechanical precision that seemed more puppetry than natural motion.
Kaelin,
She acknowledged, watching as his gaze tracked her with predatory focus.
where is my father?
A smile spread across his face, familiar yet wrong, as if someone else wore Kaelin's features like an ill-fitting mask.
The High Councilor awaits.
He replied, gesturing toward the northern passage with a sweeping motion too theatrical for the man she'd known all her life.
I'd be honored to escort you.
Cassius shifted subtly beside her, his body angling between Lyra and Kaelin without drawing obvious attention to the protective positioning. His eyes had clouded with spirit sight, perceiving what ordinary vision couldn't detect.
His essence is fragmented.
Cassius whispered, voice barely audible yet urgently tense.
Something occupies the spaces between his thoughts, like shadows cast by a fire that shouldn't exist.
Lyra's fingers tightened around the fire she'd been preparing to summon.
Possessed?
Not exactly.
Cassius replied, watching as Kaelin's head tilted at an unnatural angle.
More like dominated. his will subsumed by external influence.
Elder Thorn made a subtle gesture, and the spirit mages spread into a containment formation without appearing to move deliberately.
Preparation for soul severance ritual.
He murmured to Cassius, who nodded without taking his eyes off Kaelin.
We need time.
Cassius told Lyra.
Distract him, but don't kill him. Whatever controls him isn't his fault.
Kaelin's smile widened, revealing teeth too white and perfect for the administrative assistant's normally modest appearance.
Is something wrong?
He asked, voice carrying mocking concern beneath its surface courtesy.
You seem hesitant to follow.
Just surprised to see you here.
Lyra replied, stepping forward with deliberate confidence that concealed the tension coiling through her muscles.
Given the chaos above, I expected emergency protocols would have you at my father's side.
Something flickered behind Kaelin's eyes. A momentary struggle quickly suppressed by whatever force controlled him.
Circumstances required adaptation.
He said, the formal phrasing unlike his usual conversational tone. As Lyra maintained the distraction with careful conversation, she noted the spirit mages subtly repositioning themselves, creating a configuration that would both maximize their ritual effectiveness and protect against potential combat in the confined space. Cassius had begun a series of small, precise gestures with his right hand, silver energy gathering around his fingers in patterns too complex for her to interpret while maintaining eye contact with Kaelin.
I'm sure my father will be relieved to see us.
Lyra continued, taking another step forward that drew Kaelin's attention more fully toward her.
Especially with Spirit Guild reinforcements.
At the mention of spirit mages, Kaelin's posture changed. Subtle, but immediate. The false pleasantness vanished, replaced by a cold calculation that had never existed in the kind-hearted assistant she'd known since childhood.
The Master doesn't welcome interference.
He stated flatly, all pretense abandoned as his hands rose in a casting gesture unfamiliar to Lyra's extensive magical training.
The Crown demands obedience, not assistance.
The attack came without further warning. Not fire as Lyra might have expected from a guild member, but a wave of invisible force that slammed into her with physical impact. She would have been thrown backward had Zara not caught her arm, steadying her against the sudden assault.
The crown.
Elder Thorn repeated, understanding crystallizing in his weathered features.
As we feared.
Kaelin's hands moved in patterns that violated the fundamental principles of Fire Guild technique. His fingers leaving trails of sickly copper-gold energy that hung in the air like corrupted flame. Sweat beaded on his forehead with each motion, his body clearly struggling to channel magic beyond its natural capacity.
Defensive positions.
Cassius ordered, abandoning the subtle approach for direct action as Kaelin prepared another attack. Silver energy flowed from his hands, forming a barrier between the possessed assistant and their group. Kaelin laughed, a sound that contained nothing of the man's natural voice.
Fire and spirit working together.
He mocked, fingers tracing sigils that burned with unnatural light.
How charmingly desperate.
The next attack shattered against Cassius's silver barrier. Fragments of copper-gold energy dissipating harmlessly against the spirit shield. Yet the impact left visible cracks in the protective magic. Evidence that whatever power Kaelin channeled exceeded normal human capabilities.
We need to isolate him for the ritual.
Elder Thorn instructed, silver energy flowing from his weathered hands to reinforce Cassius's barrier.
Containment rather than confrontation.
Lyra understood immediately. Kaelin wasn't their enemy. He was its victim. his mind and magic corrupted by whatever connection the crown had established. To harm him would mean punishing the innocent for crimes forced upon him. With practiced precision, she gathered fire between her palms, shaping it not into destructive force, but into a complex illusion designed to disorient rather than damage. The flames flowed outward, surrounding Kaelin with images of himself multiplied a dozen times, each copy mimicking his movements with slight delay. The disorientation worked exactly as intended. Kaelin's next attack faltered as he struggled to determine which target was real among the identical images surrounding him. His confusion created the opening Cassius had been waiting for.
Now!
He called to the spirit mages, who moved with synchronized precision that spoke to extensive training. 5 of them formed a perfect pentagram around Kaelin, their hands weaving silver energy into a containment pattern that rose from the stone floor like spectral chains. Kaelin screamed as the binding magic touched him. Not pain, but rage. The sound containing harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from a human throat.
You cannot interfere.
He howled, voice shifting between his natural tone and something ancient and terrible.
The crown has claimed him. The master's will cannot be denied.
Despite the binding magic restricting his movement, Kaelin's hands continued their unnatural gestures. Copper gold energy building around him in swirling eddies that strained against the spirit mage's containment. Sweat now poured down his face, blood beginning to trickle from his nose and ears as his body struggled to channel power beyond mortal limitations.
He's killing himself.
Lyra realized with horror, watching as Kaelin's life force drained into the magic he was being forced to perform.
Whatever's controlling him doesn't care if the vessel survives.
Cassius nodded grimly, hands already moving in the complex patterns of high spirit magic.
The domination runs deep, woven through his essence rather than merely overlaid upon it. Extraction without harming him requires precision beyond standard exorcism techniques.
Then let me help.
Lyra insisted, moving to stand beside him despite the danger of Kaelin's increasingly erratic attacks.
Like at the Vale. Fire and spirit working together.
A moment of hesitation crossed Cassius's features. Not doubt in her abilities, but concern for her safety given their opponent's unpredictable power. Then understanding dawned, his violet eyes clearing as he recognized the potential in her suggestion.
Extension rather than replacement.
He agreed, echoing their successful approach during the Vale crisis.
Your precision control providing the surgical tool, my perception guiding its application.
Elder Thorn watched this exchange with sharp attention, then nodded once. Approval of their unorthodox approach despite the risks it represented.
The containment will hold.
He assured them, joining the pentagram to strengthen the binding magic restraining Kaelin's physical movement.
But hurry. His life force diminishes with each assault.
Lyra positioned herself beside Cassius, close enough that their shoulders touched. Physical connection enhancing the magical resonance they had discovered together. The moon opal at her throat pulsed with cool energy that synchronized with her heartbeat, its protection extending to this new working they were about to attempt.
I'll perceive the connections.
Cassius explained quickly, his voice steady despite the visible strain Kaelin's continued resistance placed on the containment field.
Guide your flame along the pathways I identify, not to burn, but to illuminate. The foreign presence cannot maintain its hold when exposed to properly aligned consciousness.
Understanding flowed between them without need for further explanation. their established connection providing framework that transcended normal instructional requirements. Lyra gathered fire between her fingers. Not the roaring flames of combat magic, but precisely controlled illumination that responded to her will with microscopic accuracy. Cassius's consciousness touched hers through their established link, his perception extending her awareness beyond physical limitations to see what he witnessed with spirit sight. Kalen's essence became visible, not just his physical form, but the complex energy patterns that composed his true self. Within these patterns, darker threads wove through his natural signature like invasive roots, connecting to a central point at the base of his skull where copper-gold energy pulsed with hungry rhythm.
There,
Cassius directed, his voice seemingly distant despite his physical proximity as his consciousness divided between guiding her and maintaining the perception.
the primary anchor point where the domination first established itself.
Lyra directed her flame with surgical precision, following the path Cassius revealed through their shared awareness. The fire responded to her will with perfect control, flowing along the invasive threads without damaging Kalen's natural essence. Where her flame touched the copper-gold energy, the domination threads recoiled, not burning but exposed, their structure becoming visible not just to Cassius's spirit sight, but to the conventional perception of the other mages maintaining the containment.
Remarkable.
Elderthorn murmured, his concentration never wavering from the binding pentagon despite his evident appreciation of their unorthodox technique.
Illumination rather than destruction.
Kalen's struggles intensified as more of the domination structure became visible, his body contorting against the spirit bindings with such force that blood vessels burst beneath his skin, creating a web of crimson beneath his increasingly pale complexion. The copper-gold energy surrounding him concentrated into a defensive formation around the anchor point Lyra's flame approached.
It knows we found it.
Cassius warned, his hand finding hers to strengthen their connection as they faced increased resistance.
Prepared for a final defense.
Lyra felt the pressure building against her flame as it approached the central anchor. Not physical force, but will opposing will. Consciousness struggling against consciousness across the battlefield of Kalen's violated essence. The copper-gold energy contracted around the anchor point, forming a shield of corrupted power that her flame couldn't easily penetrate despite its precise application.
Together,
She suggested, fingers intertwining with Cassius's as she remembered how their magics had synthesized during the Veil crisis.
not fire guided by spirit, but true integration.
Understanding flowed between them with remarkable ease, their established connection providing foundation for this more complex working. Cassius's silver energy merged with Lyra's golden flame, creating something that existed as neither yet contained properties of both. A spiraling helix of illumination that carried the precision of fire and the perception of spirit in perfect harmony. The synthesized magic struck the copper-gold shield with controlled force that bypassed resistance through compatibility rather than opposition. Like a key crafted for specific lock, their combined essence flowed through the defensive barrier to touch the central anchor that maintained the domination. Kalen screamed. a sound of such anguish that several spirit mages momentarily faltered in their concentration before reinforcing the containment field. Inside their shared perception, Lyra witnessed the anchor point shudder as their combined magic surrounded it. The copper-gold energy pulsing with increasingly desperate rhythm as its control faced genuine threat.
It's connected to something beyond him.
Cassius observed, his consciousness extending deeper through their synthesized magic to perceive what remained partially concealed.
A tether leading elsewhere, not physical location, but consciousness at a distance.
The revelation crystallized with sudden clarity in their shared awareness. Not just possession or simple domination, but remote control established through artificial connection. The copper-gold energy didn't originate within Kaelin, but flowed into him through a channel maintained by external will.
The crown,
Lyra concluded, the pieces fitting together with disturbing precision.
Alek is channeling through it, extending his influence beyond normal limitations.
Their synthesized magic surrounded the anchor point completely, cutting off the external channel without damaging Kaelin's natural essence. The copper-gold energy flared with final desperate resistance, pouring additional power through the connection in attempt to maintain control. The backlash sent shock waves through their shared perception, momentarily disrupting the delicate balance of their combined working.
Hold steady.
Cassius urged, his hand tightening around hers as they fought to maintain their synthesis despite the increasing pressure.
One final push to sever the connection completely.
Lyra focused entirely on their joined magic, pouring her remaining strength into the precision and control that had always been her greatest talent. The synthesized helix contracted around the anchor point with final, decisive force. Not destroying, but displacing, pushing the invasive connection out of Kaelin's essence without damaging the natural pathways it had infiltrated. With a sound like glass shattering at frequencies beyond normal hearing, the connection broke. Copper-gold energy dissipated in a concussive wave that shook the tunnel despite existing partially beyond physical reality. Kaelin collapsed within the containment field, his body suddenly limp as puppet strings had been cut with a single decisive stroke. Lyra and Cassius staggered backward, their synthesized magic dissolving as the immediate threat disappeared. Exhaustion claimed them both, the complex working having drained magical reserves already depleted by previous exertions. Only their continued physical connection, fingers still intertwined despite the working's conclusion, provided stability against complete collapse. Elderthorn dismissed the containment field with practiced gesture, kneeling beside Kaelin's unconscious form to assess his condition.
Alive.
He confirmed, weathered fingers checking pulse with clinical precision.
Though severely depleted, the domination extracted significant life force during its occupation.
Zara moved quickly to help, her practical nature focusing on immediate medical concerns.
He needs healing.
She observed, noting the network of burst blood vessels visible beneath Kaelin's unnaturally pale skin.
The damage extends beyond physical injuries.
Spirit healing can address the essential damage.
Cassius confirmed, his professional assessment returning despite the evident exhaustion that made his normally fluid movements appear stiff and pained.
Though complete recovery will require time and specialized care.
Kaelin's eyes fluttered open, awareness returning with visible struggle as his consciousness reconnected with a body pushed beyond natural limitations. Recognition dawned slowly as his gaze found Lyra kneeling beside him, confusion giving way to horrified understanding of what had transpired.
Lyra?
He whispered, voice raw from screaming during the extraction.
Forgive me, I couldn't stop it.
There's nothing to forgive.
She assured him, genuine compassion replacing tactical considerations as she witnessed his suffering.
The domination wasn't your choice or your fault.
Tears welled in Kaelin's eyes, pain mixing with relief at this absolution he clearly hadn't expected.
He placed it on my head.
He managed, words coming with evident effort as his depleted body struggled to maintain consciousness.
The Crown said it was just for a moment. Then I was no longer myself.
The Crown of Cinders.
Elder Thorn supplied, the formal name carrying weight beyond its syllables.
Or some version Alek has managed to partially reconstruct.
Kaelin nodded weakly, the simple movement clearly costing him tremendous effort.
Controls minds?
He whispered, blood-flecked spittle forming at the corners of his mouth as his body continued failing despite their intervention.
Not just mine. Others. Important positions throughout the guild, waiting, preparing.
The implications sent cold dread sliding down Lyra's spine. Not an isolated incident, but systematic infiltration. Key positions throughout the Fire Guild compromised through the same domination they had witnessed in Kaelin. Sleeper agents waiting for activation at critical moment.
My father.
She realized, fear for her parent transcending their complicated relationship and political differences.
Is your...
Resisted.
Kaelin managed, his eyes beginning to close as consciousness slipped away, despite his evident determination to provide critical information.
Too strong, fighting now. Administrative Hall, Central Chamber.
His gaze fixed on Lyra with final, desperate focus.
Alek changes. Not human anymore. Be careful.
With these ominous words, unconsciousness claimed him completely. Two spirit mages immediately moved to stabilize his condition, silver energy flowing from their hands into his depleted essence with healing purpose rather than combative force.
He requires evacuation to proper healing facilities.
Elder Thorn determined, gesturing for attendants to prepare Kaelin for transport.
His information, however, demands immediate response.
Lyra rose, determination overcoming physical exhaustion as she contemplated her father fighting alone against threats he couldn't fully comprehend.
The administrative hall.
She confirmed, orienting herself within the tunnel system's complex layout.
The northern passage leads directly to an access point beneath the central chamber.
Cassius stood beside her, his hand finding hers with natural ease.
We should reinforce our mental defenses before proceeding.
He suggested, scholarly precision providing a practical solution to the newfound understanding of their opponent's capabilities.
If the Crown can dominate minds from a mere momentary contact, conventional protections may prove insufficient.
Elder Thorn nodded agreement, already gathering the spirit mages not occupied with Kaelin's stabilization.
Spirit shielding against mental intrusion.
He instructed, hands moving in complex patterns that left silver trails hanging briefly in the air.
Enhanced configuration, specifically calibrated against artificial domination rather than just influence.
The protection ritual required only moments, each spirit mage receiving a defensive enhancement, tailored to their particular magical signature. When Cassius approached Lyra to provide similar protection, the moon opal at her throat pulsed with sudden warmth, its energy flaring briefly before settling back into its normal rhythm.
Interesting,
He observed, violet eyes studying the opal with scholarly fascination despite the urgent circumstances.
The choker already provides similar protection, perhaps even stronger than what I could currently establish. Our connection appears to have enhanced its defensive capabilities.
The revelation might have warranted further exploration under different circumstances. Now, with Kaelin stabilized for evacuation, and their mental defenses reinforced against the Crown's influence, immediacy demanded action, rather than analysis.
We move now.
Elder Thorn declared. No longer the scholarly elder, but a battlefield commander with centuries of experience informing his decisive leadership.
Formation adjusted for urban combat in restricted environments. Magister Embersong takes point position with navigational priority.
As they reorganized for continued advance through the Northern Passage, Lyra found herself studying Cassius with a momentary focus. Despite exhaustion evident in the subtle tension around his eyes, determination had transformed his scholarly features into something harder, more resolved. A warrior's focus rather than an academic's detachment. Their brief soul extraction working had deepened the connection between them in ways she couldn't fully articulate even to herself. The synthesis of their magics had occurred with increasing ease, compatibility that defied the traditional understanding of elemental separation. Not fire and spirit working alongside each other, but genuine integration that created something beyond either individual discipline. The remainder of their journey through the Northern Passage proceeded without further incident, though tension mounted with each step, bringing them closer to the administrative hall, where her father apparently fought alone. Lyra led with confidence born from a lifetime navigating Pyreholm's complex architecture, each turning and junction points a familiar reference. They reached the access point beneath the central chamber, a heavy trap door built into the ceiling of the tunnel's final section, designed for emergency evacuation rather than standard entry. Voices filtered through the thick stone, shouted commands interspersed with the distinctive sounds of magical combat above.
Defensive positions.
Elder Thorn ordered quietly, spirit mages arranging themselves for maximum effectiveness upon entry into what clearly represented active battlefield. Lyra positioned herself beneath the trapdoor, hands already gathering fire with the precision control that had always been her greatest strength. Beside her, Cassius prepared his own magic, silver energy flowing around his fingers with controlled purpose that complemented her golden flames without competing or interfering with their distinct properties.
Together,
She whispered, the word carrying more meaning than its syllables might suggest.
Always.
He replied, with synchronized motion born from their deepening connection. They directed their combined magic toward the trapdoor's locking mechanism. The barrier swung open with controlled force, creating access to the administrative chamber where chaos reigned in full destructive glory. The scene that greeted them exceeded even their worst expectations. The Grand Chamber, once a showcase of Fire Guild architectural perfection with its soaring columns and precisely configured ceremonial spaces, had been transformed into a devastated battlefield. Walls bore scorch marks from magical assaults. Furniture lay shattered across marble floors, stained with substances Lyra preferred not to identify too precisely. Air itself seemed to shimmer with conflicting energies that created visual distortion throughout the massive space. In the center of this destruction stood her father, High Councilor Lyra Embersong, maintaining a defensive position that protected a handful of wounded guild members behind a hastily established barricade of overturned tables and damaged stone fragments. His normally immaculate formal robes hung in tatters around his powerful frame. Blood-staining fabric along his left side where something had clearly landed a significant injury, despite his formidable defensive capabilities. Against him, a horrifying assortment of entities pressed with relentless determination. Incubi and succubi in their true forms, rather than human disguises, their beauty and terror existing simultaneously in configurations that defied comfortable perception. Unlike the solitary entities they had previously encountered, these demons attacked with coordinated purpose, suggesting a collective intelligence directing their individual efforts.
Father,
Lyra called, the word emerging before conscious consideration that her return from supposed death might create. In this moment, familial connection transcended all other concerns. Genuine fear for his safety overriding a complicated history and recent deceptions. Lyra Embersong turned at her voice, shock transforming his battle-hardened features as recognition registered, despite the impossibility her presence represented.
Lyra?
He gasped, momentary distraction nearly costing him as a succubus lunged toward the opening in his defenses. Elder Thorn's silver binding caught the demon mid-attack, spectral chains wrapping around its impossible form with restraining force that drew agonized shriek from entities clearly unaccustomed to effective opposition. The spirit mages emerged from the tunnel in perfect formation, their combined working creating a wave of silver energy that swept across the chamber with cleansing purpose.
Spirit Guild offers assistance.
Elder Thorn announced formally, ancient protocol for alliance despite centuries of separation between their magical disciplines. Relief and confusion warred across the High Councilor's features as he witnessed this extraordinary development. His daughter returned from apparent death. Spirit mages arriving in coordinated intervention. Salvation materializing from directions he couldn't possibly have anticipated. Yet his battlefield experience apparently overrode personal shock. Tactical assessment replacing emotional response with admirable speed.
Gratefully accepted.
He replied, the formal acknowledgement establishing coalition despite lacking time for proper diplomatic procedure.
The Western approach requires immediate reinforcement before the barriers fail completely.
The spirit mages moved with practiced efficiency, dividing into tactical units that supplemented existing defenses while providing specialized containment capabilities the fire mages clearly lacked against these particular opponents. Silver energy flowed across the chamber in complex patterns, creating binding configurations that trap the demons with increasing effectiveness as their numerical advantage gradually diminished. Lyra fought her way to her father's side, precision fire clearing path through entities that recoiled from her flames, not through physical damage, but momentary disorientation that created openings for more effective spirit bindings. Cassius remained close behind her, his silver magic complementing her golden flame with synchronized harmony that spoke to their deepening connection despite the chaos surrounding them. When she finally reached the central barricade, Lyra Embersong stared at her with emotion she had rarely witnessed in the politically calculated exterior he typically maintained.
You live?
he stated simply, the words carrying weight beyond their obvious meaning.
How?
A necessary deception.
She replied, understanding the limited opportunity for proper explanation amid ongoing battle.
I'll explain everything once these entities are properly contained.
Her father nodded once, accepting this abbreviated response with remarkable composure given the extraordinary circumstances. His attention shifted to Cassius with sharp assessment that missed nothing, despite the chaotic environment surrounding them.
Spirit seer.
He acknowledged, recognition evidently extending beyond mere magical discipline to specific identity.
Your assistance proves fortuitously timed.
Coordination rather than coincidence.
Cassius replied, his focus divided between conversation and ongoing magical support of spirit mages establishing primary containment field around the larger concentration of demons. Understanding passed between the two men with remarkable efficiency despite minimal verbal exchange. Mutual recognition of competence, transcending guild boundaries that had traditionally separated their magical disciplines. The High Councilor turned his attention back to the battle without further questions, accepting their alliance with pragmatic focus on immediate survival rather than political implications.
They target the Western Barrier specifically,
he informed them, indicating a section of the chamber where a particularly concentrated assault continued despite the spirit mage's arrival. Lyra studied the western wall. Beyond the immediate barrier, the council chambers connected to historical archives containing records dating to Pyreholm's founding. A potential target containing information valuable beyond simple destruction.
The original crown,
she realized, connection forming with sudden clarity.
Records of its configuration and purpose would be stored in those archives.
Cassius nodded, understanding flowing between them without requiring elaborate explanation.
Alek seeks the complete design.
He confirmed, violet eyes narrowing as he studied the demon's attack pattern with increasing comprehension.
His reconstructed version clearly functions, but lacks the full capability of the original artifact.
Their analysis proved immediately relevant as the coordinated push from the demons nearly breached the western barrier. Only the combined efforts of fire and spirit mages preventing complete collapse of the defensive perimeter. The entities fought with increasing desperation, suggesting awareness that their temporal advantage diminished with each moment the defenders maintained cohesive resistance.
Containment nearly complete in the eastern section.
Elder Thorn reported, approaching their position with evident purpose despite the ongoing combat surrounding them.
The banishment ritual requires preparation once the physical restraint achieves sufficient stability.
Lyra noted the significance beneath his practical assessment, not merely driving the entities back, but properly removing them from the realm entirely. A more permanent solution, rather than a temporary victory. Her father apparently recognized this distinction as well, his expression shifting from immediate tactical focus to broader strategic consideration.
whatever resources required.
He offered immediately, political authority enabling decisions that might otherwise require council approval under less desperate circumstances.
Fire Guild will provide the necessary support.
The alliance solidified in this simple exchange. Ancient rivals finding common purpose against a threat that transcended traditional boundaries. Fire and spirit working together not through reluctant necessity, but genuine recognition of complementary strengths and shared responsibility. As the tide of battle gradually turned in their favor, The demon's coordinated assault began fragmenting into increasingly desperate individual efforts. The spirit mages established primary containment fields around separated groups, silver energy forming pentagrams that gradually contracted to restrict their movement, while fire mages provided supplementary barriers preventing physical escape attempts. Victory seemed increasingly certain when a sudden change rippled through the remaining entities. Not retreat, but transformation. Their desperate resistance yielding to a stillness that suggested an external command. As one, they turned toward the western wall, forms rippling with unnatural motion that defied biological limitations.
Something comes.
Cassius warned, violet eyes clouding with spirit sight that perceived beyond ordinary limitations.
The demons respond to an external will overriding their individual purposes.
The western wall shuddered once, then exploded inward with catastrophic force that sent stone fragments flying across the chamber like deadly projectiles. Defenders ducked behind whatever cover remained available. Protective magics hastily established to shield against unexpected architectural destruction. Through the massive opening stepped a figure that sent ice through Lyra's veins, despite the chamber's lingering heat from magical combat. Alek Brightforge, yet not Alek as she had known him. His copper-gold hair now writhed like living flame around features that shifted subtly between human appearance and something ancient and terrible that existed beneath the familiar facade. Upon his head rested a crown of twisted metal. 3 points rising from a central band that pulsed with sickly copper-gold energy, matching what they had witnessed flowing through Kaelin during his domination. The fire opal from her former necklace now sat embedded in the crown's central point, burning with inner darkness that consumed light rather than emitting it.
My little bird returns to her cage.
Alek observed, voice layered with harmonic undertones that shouldn't have been possible from human vocal cords. His golden eyes fixed on Lyra with hunger that transcended physical desire.
How appropriate that we should all be gathered for the culmination of our arrangement.
The remaining demons withdrew to positions flanking their master. Their previous combat fury replaced by submissive postures that suggested absolute dominance rather than mere leadership. The crown pulsed with increasing intensity, copper-gold energy extending tendrils through the air like searching fingers as Alek surveyed the defended chamber with predatory assessment.
Surrender now, and I'll consider allowing some to survive as privileged servants, rather than mere fuel.
He offered, magnanimous tone belying the absolute threat beneath his seemingly reasonable proposal.
Resist, and all will feed the crown's completion, rather than merely witnessing it.
Lyra felt the moon opal pulse against her throat with protective intensity. Its cool energy creating barrier against the searching tendrils as they approached her position. Beside her, Cassius moved with subtle precision, silver shield expanding to encompass both her and her father, as the copper-gold energy probed for vulnerabilities in their defenses.
Your bargain has consumed you, Alek,
she called, refusing to show fear despite the terrible transformation evident in the man she had once been expected to marry.
Whatever humanity remained has been sacrificed to powers beyond your control.
Something flickered across his features, a momentary expression that might have been grief or rage, too quickly suppressed to identify with certainty. The crown flared in response to this emotional disruption, its copper-gold energy momentarily intensifying before settling back into a pulsing rhythm that suggested artificial stability rather than natural.
Together.
The word had barely left Lyra's lips when Alek struck. The copper-gold energy erupted from the crown in a violent wave, shattering the remaining defensive barriers with terrifying ease. Spirit mages were thrown backward, their silver shields crumbling under the onslaught. Even Elder Thorn staggered, his weathered face contorting with effort as he fought to maintain his footing.
Amusing.
Alek sneered, the crown pulsing with hungry light.
You still believe in choice when destiny has already decided.
With a casual flick of his wrist, he sent a bolt of corrupted flame toward Lyra's father. Doran barely managed to deflect it, his normally perfect form faltering from exhaustion and blood loss. The High Councilor dropped to one knee, his breathing labored.
Father!
Lyra moved to protect him, summoning a precise flame barrier between the High Councilor and Alek. It was exactly what Alek wanted. The moment she stepped away from Cassius, the crown flared with malevolent purpose. The floor between them erupted, a fissure splitting the stone with violent force. Lyra stumbled backward as the crack widened, separating her from Cassius with brutal efficiency.
Predictable.
Alek laughed, the sound no longer containing any trace of his human voice.
Love makes you weak, little bird. It makes you choose sentiment over strategy.
Cassius leapt toward the widening gap, silver energy swirling around him as he attempted to bridge the distance. Before he could cross, a wall of copper-gold flame erupted from the fissure, forcing him back with unnatural heat that even Lyra could feel from her position.
No spirit magic will cross my barrier,
Alek declared, raising his hands. The demons flanking him moved in perfect synchronization, their bodies rippling as they positioned themselves around the chamber.
Now witness what true power looks like.
The crown's energy flowed outward, targeting the separated defenders with precise strikes. With Cassius cut off from her, Lyra felt the moon opal's protection diminish. Still present, but weaker, its connection stretched thin by the physical and magical barrier between them. Across the chamber, Cassius faced his own battle. 3 succubi circled him, their beautiful forms shifting between seductive illusion and terrible reality as they probed his defenses. Elder Thorn and the remaining spirit mages fought desperately against the incubi that had targeted them. Silver bindings proving less effective now that Alek actively countered their magic through the crown.
Focus on his left flank,
Doran commanded, rallying the fire mages despite his injuries.
Coordinated assault on my mark.
The High Councilor's tactical experience proved valuable as the fire mages launched simultaneous attacks, their flames briefly breaking through Alek's defensive perimeter. For a moment, victory seemed possible, until the crown flared again, absorbing their fire and redirecting it with amplified force. 3 fire mages fell instantly, their bodies crumpling as their own magic was turned against them. Doran barely managed to shield himself and Lyra, his protective barrier flickering under the strain.
He's feeding on our magic,
Lyra realized, watching as the crown grew brighter with each attack they launched.
Every assault makes him stronger.
Across the chamber, Cassius had reached the same conclusion. He abandoned direct attacks, shifting to defensive tactics as he fought to make his way around the fissure toward Lyra. The succubi pursued him relentlessly, their claws leaving silver gashes in the air, where his spirit shield deflected their strikes.
You cannot resist what was always meant to be.
Alek called, his attention fixed on Lyra as he advanced through the chaos. The copper-gold cage of energy still surrounded him, moving with each step like a second skin woven from corrupted magic.
The crown will have what it requires. Your ancestral connections, his spirit perception, all to complete what was broken by fear and ignorance centuries ago.
Lyra backed away, maintaining a defensive position between Alek and her injured father. The moon opal pulsed against her throat, but its protection felt incomplete, like a shield missing half its structure. Without Cassius nearby, their connection had weakened, leaving her vulnerable to the crown's influence in ways she hadn't anticipated.
The crown was designed for harmony, not dominance.
She countered, searching desperately for a path around the fissure.
5 equal participants, not one tyrant feeding on others.
Something flickered across Alek's face. A brief expression of genuine pain quickly suppressed by whatever entity shared his consciousness. The crown dimmed momentarily, its pulsing rhythm faltering before resuming with greater intensity. He's still in there, Lyra realized, somewhere beneath Enkinador's control. This vulnerability gave her an idea. Instead of attacking Alek directly, she focused her fire on the crown itself, sending a precise bolt of flame toward the fire opal embedded in its central point. The jewel had once been connected to her, had channeled her magic. Perhaps some resonance remained that she could exploit. Her flames struck the opal with perfect accuracy, but instead of damaging the crown, the jewel absorbed her fire with hungry eagerness. The copper-gold energy flared, tendrils lashing out to seize her magic and pull it inward. Lyra gasped as she felt the connection form, not the invasive heat of the necklace, but something deeper and more fundamental. The crown was attempting to access her ancestral connections directly, bypassing the need for physical contact.
Yes.
Alek hissed, his eyes glowing with triumph.
Give yourself to completion, little bird. Your resistance only prolongs the inevitable.
Across the chamber, Cassius battled with increasing desperation. He had dispatched one succubus with a binding that had cost him dearly, his silver energy noticeably dimmer as he faced the remaining 2. Through their weakened connection, Lyra sensed his growing exhaustion, the strain of fighting without their combined strength taking its toll.
Lyra!
He called, his voice barely audible over the chaos.
We need to reunite. The connection.
His words cut off as a succubus caught him with a glancing blow, tearing through his robes and leaving a bloody gash across his shoulder. Cassius staggered, his spirit shield flickering dangerously as he struggled to maintain his defenses. Fear for him overwhelmed tactical consideration.
Cassius!
Lyra abandoned her position, racing along the fissure's edge, searching desperately for a crossing point. The moon opal flared at her throat, responding to her emotional surge with renewed energy. Alek noticed her movement and smiled.
How predictable.
He mocked, gesturing toward Cassius. The crown's energy surged, knocking the spirit seer backward into a crumbling column. Stone fragments rained down, momentarily burying him from view.
No.
Lyra's cry tore from her throat, raw with emotion she no longer attempted to conceal. Fire erupted around her, not the precise control she normally maintained, but something wilder, more primal. Pure emotion transformed into flame. Her unrestrained power caught Alek by surprise. The wall of fire crashed against his copper-gold cage, momentarily destabilizing its structure. For a brief instant, his confidence wavered, the crown's light flickering as it struggled to contain her unexpected assault.
Impossible.
He snarled, genuine shock replacing mockery.
Your flame cannot...
My flame is no longer mine alone.
Lyra interrupted, understanding crystallizing within her as the moon opal burned cold against her skin.
Just as I am no longer simply myself.
Across the chamber, Cassius emerged from the rubble, bloody but unbowed. His violet eyes found hers across the distance, connections surging between them despite physical separation. The moon opal responded to this renewed link, its energy flowing outward in a visible manifestation of silver-blue light that formed a bridge across the fissure. Not physical, but metaphysical. A pathway that existed between realities rather than within conventional space.
The connection transcends physical proximity.
Cassius called, understanding mirroring her own.
It exists in what we choose, not where we stand.
Alek sensed the danger in their realization. He gestured sharply, sending the remaining demons to intercept Cassius while he advanced on Lyra, the copper-gold cage expanding as if preparing to engulf her.
Sentiment will not save you.
He snarled, the crown's points elongating like grasping fingers.
The crown demands completion, and you will provide what it requires.
Lyra stood her ground, no longer retreating from his advance. The moon opal's energy surrounded her in a protective cocoon, its connection to Cassius providing strength beyond her individual capacity. Across the metaphysical bridge their bond had created, she felt his presence as clearly as if he stood beside her.
You've never understood what true power is,
she told Alek, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them.
You sought to control what can only be freely given.
Alek's laugh held no humor, only bitter contempt.
Philosophy will not shield you from reality, little bird. Your freedom is illusion, your choice meaningless against forces beyond your comprehension.
He struck with terrible force, the crown's energy lashing out to seize her physically. The copper-gold tendrils wrapped around her arms, burning where they touched despite the moon opal's protection. Lyra cried out in pain, her knees buckling as the crown began to drain her essence directly. Across the chamber, Cassius fought with renewed desperation, witnessing her capture through their shared awareness.
Lyra,
He shouted, abandoning defense entirely as he cut a direct path toward her, regardless of the danger to himself. A succubus caught him with a vicious slash across his back, but he didn't falter, his focus entirely on reaching her. The moon opal flared in response to their mutual need, its power flowing along the metaphysical bridge between them. Lyra felt Cassius's determination as if it were her own, his strength supplementing hers as she resisted the crown's draining pull.
I won't let you take her.
Cassius declared, his voice carrying across physical and metaphysical distance alike. Silver energy erupted around him, no longer controlled or measured, but raw power fueled by something beyond tactical necessity. Alek turned toward this new threat, momentarily distracted from his absorption of Lyra's essence.
Touching.
he sneered, directing the crown's energy toward Cassius while maintaining his hold on Lyra.
The spirit seer fights for his love while she dies in my grasp. A tragedy worthy of ancient ballads.
The attack struck Cassius with brutal force, driving him to his knees. Yet he did not fall, his eyes never leaving Lyra's despite the pain evident in every line of his face. Through their connection, she felt his unwavering resolve, his absolute refusal to surrender her to Alek's corrupted ambition.
I love you.
He called, the simple declaration cutting through chaos and pain with crystalline clarity. The words penetrated Lyra's fading consciousness, igniting something that the crown could not touch or drain. Not merely emotion, but choice. Deliberate, conscious decision that transcended instinct or circumstance.
I love you,
she answered, her voice weak but unwavering. The moon opal blazed with sudden brilliance as their declarations aligned, no longer merely protecting, but amplifying, transforming their individual magics into something neither had imagined possible. The metaphysical bridge between them solidified, no longer silver-blue light, but something that existed as neither fire nor spirit, yet contained elements of both. Alek sensed the change, fear flashing across his features for the first time.
No.
He growled, the crown flaring as he poured more power into his hold on Lyra.
Your sentiment cannot overcome the crown's purpose.
But something had fundamentally shifted. The connection between Lyra and Cassius had deepened beyond magical resonance to touch something the crown could not access or understand. Choice freely made, love freely given, power that derived from mutual recognition rather than forced submission. With supreme effort, Cassius stood, his silver energy flowing along their connection to Lyra. She received it not as separate power, but as extension of her own strength. Their magics no longer distinct, but synthesized into something new. The copper-gold tendrils around her arms began to smoke, where this combined essence touched them. The crown's energy recoiling from something it could not consume or redirect.
Impossible.
Alek snarled, genuine alarm replacing confidence as he felt his control slipping. The crown pulsed erratically, its rhythm disrupted by the unprecedented resistance it encountered. Lyra stood straighter, the synthesized magic flowing through her like liquid light. Across the chamber, Cassius began moving toward her once more, the demons unable to impede his progress as the combined energy surrounding him burned away their corrupted forms on contact.
What is happening?
Alek demanded, the crown's points writhing like distressed serpents as its energy patterns destabilized.
This cannot be. The crown demands obedience.
The crown was never meant for obedience,
Lyra replied, her voice strengthened by the power flowing between her and Cassius.
It was designed for harmony. 5 equal elements in balance, not one consuming the others.
Understanding dawned in her mind with perfect clarity, not through study or theory, but through the lived experience of what she and Cassius had created together. The synthesis of their magics represented what the crown had originally been designed to achieve. Elements in harmony rather than opposition, strength through mutual enhancement rather than hierarchical domination.
Together we demonstrate what you perverted.
Cassius declared, now standing at the edge of the fissure opposite Lyra, their connection bridging the physical gap between them.
Not fire subjugating spirit or spirit controlling fire, but true integration that honors both.
The synthesized magic flowed between them in visible manifestation. Not Lyra's golden flame or Cassius's silver energy, but something that existed as both simultaneously. A helix of power that spiraled around their connected hands across metaphysical distance. Alek backed away, the copper-gold cage contracting around him as he attempted to shield himself from what he could neither control nor understand. The crown pulsed with increasingly desperate rhythm, its points now fully extended like grasping hands, seeking stability it could not find.
You cannot stop what has already begun,
He shouted, desperation replacing confidence as he felt his control slipping.
The crown will be completed. The boundaries will fall. I will not be denied.
It is not denial, but restoration.
Elder Thorn called from across the chamber, having dispatched the last of the demons attacking him. The elder raised his hands, adding his power to the working Lyra and Cassius had created. The remaining spirit mages followed suit, their silver energy flowing into the synthesized helix, strengthening its structure without attempting to control or direct its course. Lyra Embersong struggled to his feet, his wounds now bandaged by field healers, though his face remained pale from blood loss and exhaustion. His gaze fixed on his daughter with uncommon openness, political calculation temporarily yielding to genuine emotion after nearly losing her for a second time.
The Fire Guild stands with this restoration,
He declared, his own flames joining the combined working with surprising compatibility given centuries of enforced separation. The synthesized magic grew stronger with each additional contribution. Representatives of traditionally opposed guilds finding unexpected harmony through mutual purpose rather than enforced hierarchy. It formed a complete circle around Alek, the helix spinning faster as it contracted toward the crown with inexorable purpose.
No!
Alek screamed, the crown flaring with final desperate surge.
I am master here. I will not be contained.
The fire opal embedded in the crown's central point began to glow with unnatural brilliance as Alek poured his remaining power into a last stand against the approaching synthesis. For a brief moment, it seemed his desperate defense might succeed, until Lyra and Cassius stepped simultaneously onto the metaphysical bridge connecting them, their physical forms meeting in its center, despite the fissure beneath. The moment they touched, hands clasping, bodies aligning, the helix of synthesized magic achieved perfect harmony. No longer separate contributions flowing together, but true integration that existed as a single entity. The moon opal at Lyra's throat flared with blinding light, its protection transformed into active force that carried their combined intention directly to the crown.
Return to your cage, Enkinador.
Cassius commanded. Violet eyes locked with Lyra's amber gaze as they directed their united power.
Not as master, but as component, bound within the artifact you sought to corrupt.
The helix struck the crown with perfect accuracy, its integrated essence flowing into the fire opal at the center point. Instead of being absorbed or redirected, it penetrated the crown's structure at fundamental level, rewriting the corrupted patterns Alek had established with the original harmony the artifact had been designed to channel. Alek's scream transcended physical sound as the crown responded to this restoration. its copper-gold energy inverting to create a vortex that pulled inward rather than projecting outward. The entity sharing his consciousness, Enkinador, fought with terrible strength against this reversal, but the combined power arrayed against it proved stronger than its corrupted will.
This isn't over!
Alek howled, his voice shifting between human desperation and demonic rage.
I will return. The crown demands completion.
The vortex intensified, pulling at the merged entity that Alek and Enkinador had become. Instead of resisting separation, they embraced it together. A dark mirror of the synthesis Lyra and Cassius had achieved.
We are more together than apart.
The Alek and Enkinador entity declared, copper-gold energy swirling around them as they began to flow into the crown.
Just as you found your harmony, little bird, I found mine.
Their features shifted between human and demonic, neither fully dominating as they surrendered to the vortex's pull. Unlike the forced extraction they had expected, this was a willing transformation, ambition and hunger merging into something beyond either's individual desire.
Power recognizes power,
The entity said, eyes fixed on Lyra and Cassius with something like respect beneath the malice.
We will return when the crown calls again.
As the merged consciousness flowed completely into the artifact, the crown pulsed with terrible new purpose. Not corruption or harmony, but a third path. A twisted synthesis that matched their own but inverted. Then catastrophe. The crown released a concussive wave of uncontrolled energy. Neither copper-gold corruption nor synthesized harmony, but raw power suddenly unleashed from unstable transformation. The blast radiated outward with devastating force, striking the chamber's already damaged structure with explosive impact. Columns cracked. The ceiling began to collapse. The floor around the fissure crumbled completely, creating expanding chasm that threatened to swallow everything within the administrative hall. Alek, now free from Enkinador's control, but fatally weakened by the extraction, had no chance to escape as the floor beneath him gave way. His body fell into the widening darkness, the crown still clutched in his hands as debris followed him into the abyss.
We need to move.
Elder Thorn shouted, already organizing evacuation of the wounded fire mages.
The entire structure is failing.
Lyra and Cassius stood frozen for a brief moment, watching as the Crown of Cinders disappeared into the chasm. The crown's light visible until buried beneath cascading stone and timber. Then survival instinct reasserted itself as the ceiling directly above them began to give way.
Father,
Lyra called, turning to find the High Councilor struggling toward them despite his injuries. Cassius moved instantly, supporting Doran as they navigated the increasingly treacherous footing toward the eastern exit where Elder Thorn was gathering the survivors. The synthesized magic still surrounded them, its protective field deflecting falling debris that would have crushed them otherwise.
The crown is lost.
Doran gasped as they reached relative safety beyond the chamber's collapsing perimeter.
Buried beneath tons of stone.
Perhaps that's for the best.
Cassius replied, his arm around Lyra's waist as they watched the administrative hall's complete structural failure.
Some artifacts are too dangerous for any single hand to wield.
The survivors gathered in the courtyard outside, watching as the once magnificent administrative hall collapsed into a pile of rubble. The sounds of destruction gradually faded, replaced by the eerie silence that follows catastrophic events. A momentary pause before reality reasserts its normal patterns. Lyra leaned against Cassius, exhaustion claiming her now that the immediate danger had passed. The moon opal had returned to its normal cool presence against her throat, its extraordinary power once dormant, though permanently changed by what they had created together.
What we did in there,
She murmured, looking up at his face now streaked with blood and stone dust.
it shouldn't have been possible according to traditional understanding of elemental separation.
Cassius smiled, his violet eyes tired but triumphant as he tightened his arm around her.
Traditional understanding has always been more political convenience than magical necessity.
He replied, brushing a strand of flame-red hair from her face with gentle precision.
What we've discovered together proves what some have suspected for centuries.
Elder Thorn approached, his weathered features revealing both exhaustion and satisfaction as he surveyed the survivors gathered in the courtyard.
The demons have been banished throughout the city.
He reported.
Those under their influence are returning to normal consciousness, though many will require specialized healing to address residual damage.
And the crown?
He asked, gaze shifting to the collapsed administrative hall.
Buried with its last wielder.
Cassius answered, his tone suggesting this represented appropriate outcome rather than unfortunate loss.
Though I suspect we haven't seen the last of it. Artifacts of such power rarely remain lost permanently.
Lyra Embersong joined them, his wounds now bandaged by field healers, though his face remained pale from blood loss and exhaustion. His gaze fixed on his daughter with uncommon openness, political calculation temporarily yielding to genuine emotion after nearly losing her for a second time.
Lyra?
He said, formal address abandoned in favor of simple paternal connection.
What you did today, what you and the Spirit Seer created together, it changes everything we thought we understood about elemental compatibility.
She nodded, remaining within the circle of Cassius's arm, rather than moving to maintain appropriate distance as political protocol might have dictated.
It changes everything.
She agreed, her hand finding Cassius's with natural ease.
Including what's possible for our future, both personally and for Eldervale.
Her father studied their joined hands, something like recognition dawning in his expression.
Your mother once said true magical resonance couldn't be arranged through political alliance.
He remarked, surprising Lyra with this rare reference to the woman who had died when she was barely 5.
That it happened organically or not at all.
She was right.
Lyra replied, the simple acknowledgement carrying weight beyond its syllables.
What Cassius and I have discovered together exists beyond arrangement or calculation. It simply is, whether convenient to existing political structures or not.
To her surprise, Doran smiled. A genuine expression she had rarely witnessed throughout her childhood.
She would have liked you, Spirit Seer.
He told Cassius directly.
She never had much patience for artificial limitations either.
As the sun began to set over Pyreholm's damaged skyline, Lyra stood with Cassius among the ruins of what had been, and the beginning of what might yet become. The crown had vanished. Alek had lost. Demons had been banished. Yet nothing had truly ended. Instead, something new had begun. Not just between two people who had found an unexpected connection, but potentially for an entire society built on artificial separation, where natural harmony might yet be restored.
Together,
she whispered, the word no longer simple tactical agreement, but profound commitment that transcended immediate circumstances.
Always.
Cassius replied, his arms encircling her with protective devotion that honored her strength rather than attempting to contain it.
Whatever comes next, we face it as one.